Are your choices really yours? Or are they just echoes of someone else's influence?
Welcome to our workshop today, Breaking Free, Redesign Your Life Patterns. Teresa, I know we're going to talk about patterns a little bit, but do you have a story to use as an example?
I do have a story. We're going to be exploring this whole idea of reactions, just reacting like through a default way of thinking, where we're just running on autopilot and not being aware or intentional about our responses. So, way, way, way back when I was a young mother of three, we didn't really go on a lot of vacations, but when we finally had the opportunity to go on one, it was going to be a camping vacation because that's what we could afford. And so I was the planner and the preparer, being the mom. And so I was in preparation phases and I was packing my car full of all kinds of things that we would need for our week-long camping trip. And I was jamming the car full of all kinds of stuff. And I had purchased all this food. I'm trying to jam all this food in and make room for that, plus the kids, plus everything else we needed. When like literally I was in the driveway and I like just stopped. I mean, this is so vivid in my head. I just stopped and I could have said a lot of choice words. One, there's a set of the phrase coming into my head right now, but like, what is going on here? Like, why am I doing this? Why am I trying to fill this car full of food was the main thing. And then I just had this, it was literally like a light bulb or an epiphany went off in my brain, like, oh, because your mom did it this way.
Ah, aha,
And I
touche.
remember again another vivid image in my head of being a kid, seeing our, big station wagon full of food items under the seats and everywhere. And that's what I was doing, what, like 30 years later, the
Mm.
exact same thing. And that's when it hit me like, that's not even my stuff. That is not even my way of doing things. I was just following through on a pattern that I had seen in my childhood, and I didn't question it in any way, shape, or form until that specific moment in time. And then once I had that revelation, then I, did some rethinking and, some reevaluation. But that was like my first really awareness of repeating patterns, habitually repeating things that just came so long ago, like they didn't even make sense anymore. But because I didn't have that awareness, I was just repeating them again and again.
You inherited it
I
and carried it
inherited
forward.
it. Yes, I did. Again,
I,
without any thought.
yeah, yeah. And I had up until not that long ago, a very similar one. And I was given good counsel when I was being brought up. My parents would tell me, when you're making a decision, look at the options, weigh the pros and cons, and then make your best informed choice. And that always seemed very practical and logical. And why would you not do that?
Right,
Well, the
right.
reason you might not do it is if you look at all of these options and think, none of them are right for me. No, thank you to all of this. I'm going to go create my own thing. Or I have a different vision. And the idea of an option
Mm-hmm.
was just like it took therapy to get there. It's like, why do I
Therapy.
have to choose? I don't have to just like pick from what's there in the aisle at the grocery store. I can say, you know what, I don't want any of this and go make my own something or other. Oh, But that liberated me so
Mhm.
much
Yeah,
once I
yeah,
had the awareness. But until I did, it was just like, well, okay, that one looks the best, or
yeah, yeah.
whatever it was.
You're
But
exactly right.
I
We
made a
need
lot
that
of
awareness.
decisions that way.
Hmm. Yeah. And so many of us go through life unconsciously, I'll say unconsciously,
Mhm.
living these patterns. We both said we had this awareness. Like that's really all it took to reevaluate, rethink, get curious about what we had just done or what we were thinking. So it's just basically it's just an awareness and
Yeah.
then taking some action that
And taking the action. I know
yes.
one of the, you know, people might be wondering, how do I know? How do I get this awareness? And one of the tells for me is when I hear my mother's words come out of my mouth. It's like, okay, this needs
You're like,
evaluation.
"Ah."
It's like, wait, that's not my
Right.
voice. So for
We
me,
all
that's a
kind of
tell.
dread that, which is not a judgment of our parents.
No.
It's just like, oh, when did we turn into them? Well, we had been them all along. It
And
just
where is authentic me in that?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. And some of us take a lifetime to really uncover that authentic part of ourselves.
that's right.
Um,
So
and
I,
just in, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think we're touching on an important thing that we want to talk about, and that is, why is this important?
Mhm.
What are the costs of unchecked patterns?
Yeah, that unconsciously living out these patterns. And it could show up in so many different ways in our lives, in our relationships, in our stress level. We could be being stressed out over something that, as you said, just understanding that you had another set of options that you had not thought about before. I mean, you might have been really stressed until you understood that.
Yeah, like I've got to make this choice and I don't like any of them, but I have
Right,
to pick the
right.
best one. And until I
Mhm,
knew I don't have to, there was upset in that,
mhm,
discordance.
And just in our relationships as well. Many of us play out conditioned, learned patterns, ways of speaking, phrases. Like you said, when our parents' voice comes out of our mouth, those are just things we unconsciously picked up. And then we say those to somebody in our lives that really either don't deserve them or it's a totally different situation. But we default back to that childhood pattern. So it could definitely ripple out into relationships in ways that may not be good for either of us or any
Yeah,
of us.
truth. And I think conversely, it can mean missed opportunities and maybe not having the opportunity to express your full self. If you grew up with the idea, well, our people don't do that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, everybody in our family is
Yes,
bad with
yes,
money.
yes, yes,
And you believe
exactly.
that, and it
Mm-hmm.
becomes your truth. You
Yes,
know, it blocks the opportunity for financial growth and to be smart with your money because it becomes a belief system
yeah,
unless it gets challenged.
yes. So we put these limitations on ourselves unknowingly until we have that awareness or we examine and get curious. Even I've heard people talk about their religious upbringing, going through that unquestioningly and just following, ways they were brought up with. And then when they finally questioned it, like it kind of blew apart everything that they had learned from, previous generations. And they took a different path because of that.
Yeah. And it can feel scary
Oh, gosh, yeah.
you know, go there, as the
Yes,
expression
yes,
goes, but it's like, what if my whole world blows up? You know,
yes.
what if I get good with money?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how will I be in family if I'm
Yes,
different?
yes, yes.
And it can be challenging to
Mm-hmm.
question and then to move beyond the question to an alternative path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so true. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, because dynamics may change. People may shift out of your life. New people may come in. And yeah, that is scary. And it could be unstabilizing for a while.
Yeah. As when I was working in adult education, helping adults who chose to come back to school to prepare for their high school equivalency,
Mm,
they would start off gangbusters, you know, and they would just be doing great work. And, you know, these were often parents holding down full-time jobs, you know, really, this was a thing they were doing, and it was not
mhm.
easy. And they were pouring heart and soul into it until a sibling or a parent or a
Mhm.
spouse would say, I didn't finish high school. You think you're better
Yes,
than me?
yes, yes. Mhm.
And
Sure.
some of them could rise above it, and others just felt the weight of it
Mhm.
so strongly that they kept playing that old message. Our
Oh,
people don't do
man.
that.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. Whew. Um, and I'm just gonna, piggyback on that. People in those particular circumstances do have to evaluate that. Like when somebody's holding them back and somebody's disagreeing and making a judgment as to what their choices are.
Mhm.
Um, that's when you kind of follow the thread. Well, why is that triggering me? Why is that making me feel uncomfortable? And is that, there's so many questions we can ask ourselves if we have the emotionally resilience. Is that, I don't think that's the right phrase for it. I'm not sure what the phrase would be for it, but yeah,
It's challenging.
challenging for sure. And we're not judging anybody, and I advocate for everybody to be their own unique person, but that can be hard, like you said, in those situations.
Absolutely.
And we have to kind of squelch our own uniqueness and our own way of moving through life. I do want to bring up a situation I had. It actually was not too long ago, and where I had to question myself. So my granddaughter, she's how old is she now? I think she's 11. That's embarrassing. So she's in that tween stage, and she's not quite a kid, not quite an adult. We all remember what that felt like.
Oh,
Oh my
yes.
gosh. And I would never want to be there again. But even with that understanding and awareness, I did not react in a really good way, a really positive way when she was going through some big emotion. And I had just come in on the tail end of it, and she's all upset and she's taking it out on me. And I
Oh,
got offended by that. Like, well, I just walked in here and, so I like went to that child myself, my own little child, in the way I reacted back at her. And it was after I got away from the situation and I thought about it because I wanted to think about it. I wanted to correct my trigger, my immediate default response that was a learned pattern. I wanted to analyze it and correct it. And so after I thought about it, I realized, like I didn't handle that very well. And it was triggering this feeling in me, and my ego was bruised, blah, 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 all that stuff. And so I purposely, the next time I saw her, I went back and I apologized to her, and I kind of did some explaining and tried to show her that even adults make mistakes. And, so anyway, that was my own personal way of correcting that initial default response. Now, am
Yeah,
I never going
and
to do it
doing that
again? No, probably
exactly,
it
and
will come up again.
doing that informs how because this will probably not be her last if she's only 11.
Right,
Um,
right, right, right.
how do you deal with it next time? But I'm curious, how did she
Mhm.
take that in?
She was it was very well received. I
Mhm.
mean, it was a different day, so it was a couple days later, and I wanted to tell her privately so that, I didn't want to make a big deal in front of people. But yeah, she was very appreciative. I mean, she didn't, go into anything big, but she accepted my apology, and we basically moved on from there. And I wish I had done that more when I was a mom, apologize for ways of being triggered and reacting in a negative way. But I did not have that awareness at that point in time.
Yeah, I know. I have one that I have thought about often, and I told my partner once to stop pouting, and that wasn't. I know exactly where that came from.
Mm,
My parents didn't have the tools in their toolbox to deal with emotions that were anything other than happy, positive.
yes, yes.
And
Mhm,
so I just played that out, and it
mhm,
got dumped on her, and I should apologize now that I have the awareness, but this was decades ago, but still I
mhm,
remember that. It was like, oh, that was really harsh of me.
mhm.
And in hindsight, what I could have done was ask her what she needed
Yeah, yeah.
and give her space or give her a hug or whatever it was at the time,
Mhm, mhm.
and not let my inability to engage with her feelings be the dominant thing in the room.
Right, right. Yeah. And it's a practice. As I said, these things come up and will come up in the future. And it is a practice to train ourselves to respond in a different way, a more loving way. But yeah, let's share some of those tools that we've learned along the way that can help people with that awareness or come from a new perspective or bring a different energy um, from that initial boom, default old negative pattern to something a little bit more mature,
Yeah, and more authentic.
more authentic. Thank you. Yes.
So,
So go ahead,
well,
share one.
um, the first thing is recognition, like you wisely said. And so just pausing to reflect when you have one of those moments, when you're packing the car, overpacking the car and thinking, you know, a tell for me is when I'm grouchy about something and I'm suspecting you were having a little bit of grouchiness
Oh, I'm sure I was.
packing that car. So that's a tell. Why is this activity getting under my skin?
Hmm.
Is this really my reaction or is this something I inherited? Um, Again, hearing your parents or grandparents or auntie, but mostly it's
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
um, someone else's voice coming out of your mouth, that's another time to kind of pause and reflect.
Funny how all those different voices come out of our
They do
mouths.
pile up, don't they?
But just reframing, like you said, awareness, pausing, giving yourself a little bit of space in that moment in time, maybe breathe, kind of detach a little bit, detach from your ego and your bruised emotions, at least even momentarily could be enough to change that what's going on in that situation. And then just responding with like a curiosity discovery type of a question, like questioning yourself, of course, not necessarily the other person, but you're questioning and being curious about why you're responding that way, as you already mentioned.
One of my favorite phrases, just marching orders for life, just notice,
Mm,
and that means just notice without judgment.
hmm.
It's like, just notice.
And I
And,
remember, I'm sorry, go
oh,
ahead.
just, and bring in the curiosity.
Bring in the curiosity. And I do want to say that when I had that epiphany, among other things, I was not judging my family, my mom in any way. I had more understanding actually for her and more empathy. And I didn't, I wasn't resentful. Like I had no negative emotions around her in particular because I understood that she was doing the best she could in that particular moment. And I just wanted, I felt like I needed to share that. But and I'm sure we all feel this exact same way, both of us. There's no judgment. We're just bringing awareness and curiosity to maybe that other person's and why they were triggered. And then that triggered us. So we have this cascading domino effect that we're trying to end.
Yeah.
We don't want to perpetuate it. Like, I don't want to perpetuate what I did to my granddaughter and not responding lovingly to her big emotion. I don't want her to carry that forward in her life. So I really think it's up to us to stop and break that pattern, break those patterns.
I love the expression, it ran in my family until it ran into me.
I love
And I
that.
just, that's like, boom, it stops here.
It stops here. Yes. Yeah. And it does take somebody to make that decision, I think.
It does.
I did that same thing with disciplining my kids. It stopped with me. I was not going to continue the way I was brought up and disciplined with my kids. So I made that conscious choice as well.
Now, we have talked about the saboteur and the sage. Are there some sage tools that could be used? And when I say we've talked about it in previous workshops.
Yes, yes. In our previous live. And we just kind of referred to some of that. So empathy, have empathy for the situation, for the people involved, try to see it from their point of view. And yeah, empathy. And then explore. We talked a little bit about that already. Explore, be curious, go into it with like a discovery type of investigative. I see this little, one of those magnifying glass. Oh, very interesting. And just, yeah, just coming up with something new perspectives, a new way of moving forward, which we already mentioned as well. So those are a couple of the different ways of handling things differently.
Yeah. And then innovating a new path forward.
Yes. Yeah.
It's kind of exciting once you do notice, it's like, oh, well, I can take this any direction that feels right to me.
Yes. But actually take some action, make a decision for something new. It does take that action, that decision, that yes, yeah, I am going to try something new. It does stop with me. I am going to create a new narrative. It's all comes down to that decision as well that we make for ourselves.
Well, I would encourage those watching to reflect on a pattern maybe you've noticed even as we've been talking. Maybe something came to mind and you're thinking, oh, yeah, I do that all the time when such and such happens.
Yeah.
So we invite you to explore that and know that this type of change is just the beginning. And Teresa, you want to give a sentence about what's coming up with Wellness Your Way?
Well, I do want to mention anyone listening to this recording, if something comes up for you that you have an awareness around, please drop it in the comments. We would love to hear anything that we kind of, you know, triggered in you and brought something to mind for you. But yeah, this is something we talk about in our upcoming programs. So we would like to share a little bit about what's coming up that we want to offer people. So we have combined forces to really bring people to new awarenesses, to new perspectives. And it's called Wellness Your Way. And it is wellness on multiple levels, not just physical wellness, but emotional wellness. We have a lot of different layers. We talk about mindset and stopping patterns and creating new patterns. And it's a 4-week intensive. So it's like a boot camp, a kickstart, a kick you in the pants intensive to get you started on your new path.
A new path to wellness. It does have a fitness and nutrition component, but especially with Teresa's guidance, exploring your personal strengths so that you can then leverage those to be successful in your long-term wellness plan.
And that's why it's called Wellness Your Way, because it's not anybody else's way. It's your way based on your strengths. And so it's very customizable to you, which makes it more sustainable than what you might have tried in the past.
That's exactly right. Meant for you, made for you, and
Yeah, I
by you.
love that. Yeah. Yes, and there is, so it's a 4-week intensive, but we don't just leave you hanging after that. There is follow-up, there's accountability, and we will go into those details. If you want us to, just leave a comment and we'll definitely guide you. You can have a chat with either one of us and, see if you'd be a good fit for this program. But that's coming up in February.
Soon.
First week of February, I think.
Wow,
Yeah, that's coming up.
funny how that happens.
I know.
Well, thank you everyone for watching. And we can't wait to see what you put into the comments, what we have sparked in your thinking. So please, please, please add your comments.
Yes, we'd love to hear. And we do have another live event coming up on the 20th, which is next week. Same time, same place. And we're calling that the courage to leap, embracing the power of risk. So everything we talk about in these lives, we will share in that 4-week intensive in a little bit more depth. So
In more
please,
depth and again, tailored to each individual.
yes, yes. So please join us, share this with a friend, bring a friend. We'd
Do it together.
love to do it together. Everything's better when you do it with friends, for sure.
Absolutely. All
So
right. Well, thank you very much and bye for now.
bye-bye.